Mixing with Mike, plugin of the week is the Universal Audio Avalon VT-737sp tube channel strip. This is a new emulation by Universal Audio, Avalon design. This is an all-in-one unit, and what I mean by that is Avalon Design originally created a series of a preamp, EQ, compressor that were separate Class A units that were all super high end, and studios ate them up, really loved them. And then they came out with this channel strip, essentially, is what it is, which gives you a full preamp, high Z input. It's like amazing sounding on bass. Input select, you have a compressor, opto compressor built in, and super high end EQ. So this, according to the documentation, is the best selling channel strip unit, or all-in-one processor hardware unit of its type that exists. So that includes, and there are many other companies who are creating devices that are like this, designed specifically for recording vocals or recording bass, etc. And it's pretty stunning. I've have a good amount of experience with this, and in studios, in both private studios and commercial studios. So it's something that works on the high-end level. It's not something that's just sort of, hacked together for the sake of convenience. And it's pretty simple. So let's go over the whole setup here. Although there are some added features in here, and it's just spectacular sounding. So we'll go through the audio demos here shortly. So we have preamp gain, pretty straightforward here. We have a select switch for input, line, or mic. This will actually operate in the Unison preamp section. So if you open up your console app, you could place this on the console first slot there, the Unison slot, and this will operate as a Unison preamp, which is, by design is perfect. It's exactly what you would want to do it, as if you were tracking through the original hardware. Also amazing with bass, and it's worth connecting with that. So if you plug in a bass into the high Z input, it will automatically switch over to that, and you'll have that input coming in through the software, which you can then record. So we have the whole input section here. There's a high-pass filter, which is 6 dB per octave, so it's not a heavy one. It can be engaged here by putting the filter in, and then you have the frequency select here on a variable control. So you'll have that available to you. Then there's also a bunch of input mode type of features here. High gain, which will add gain to the input signal, phase reverse, 20 dB pad, which will work if you're in the mic's position only. It won't work in line position. The filter in and out. And then there's this times 4 switch, which works with the attack time. So this will make it 4 times faster as opposed to 4 times the number. We'll get into some of that. But basically what you have here is an optical compressor. So you have a selectable ratio, threshold. You can set it up so that the EQ is prior to the compression, but by default, the signal flow goes left to right. So you'll have preamp, compression, and equalization following in that order. With the high-pass filter is actually sandwiched in the middle of, it's a dual preamp gain stage. So it's sort of sandwiched in the middle of the preamp gain stages there. So I'm not sure exactly the reason why they do that, but sounds amazing. So it works. The meter selection will either show output level or it will show gain reduction. So you can select there. You can put the compressor in or out of circuit here. And then the sidechain link, what this does is it will link the left and right. Now, in normal operation, this is a mono unit, the hardware itself. So that feature doesn't exist on the real hardware because there's no reason for it. Or actually, maybe it does exist if you could link them up externally. Actually, I'm not sure about that. So that may be the case. But here, if you're using a stereo instance, then that will be available to you. You have your ratio, attack and release times, all pretty straightforward. Here you have the gain reduction or output based on the meter selection here. You could also bypass it here, or you could do so with the hardware switch that's on the far right. So that toggle switch. So either way, you could bypass it that way instead of doing what I always do and bypass up on there, and everybody gets mad at me. The EQ section. So we have an EQ in switch. So what we have here is 2 shelving EQs with selectable discrete frequencies. Okay, so these on the top band, the treble band, and the bass band are passive EQs, sort of Pultec style. And the 2 mid bands are active circuits. and with variable controls on the frequency, so it gives you a fair amount of range with them. So the way that you operate it then is maybe a little bit different than having like a standard 4-band where you might be able to change the shelving EQ into a parametric EQ. It's not the way that is set up, or not the way that it works. But here you have the booster gain for low, mid, and high mid band. There's a high Q switch. You should be very familiar with that if you're used to the Neve hardware, going back to the 1081 EQ, 1084 EQs that had the high Q switch, which narrows the bandwidth. So the variable bandwidth has two positions basically, and otherwise you boost or cut, select your frequency, and work accordingly. And it also extends the range. So it will go from 35 to 450. If you hit the times 10 switch in, then basically it goes 350 up to 4.5K. Right. So, and you get the extended range here on the high mid. So then this carries from 220 up to 28K if you have the times 10 in here. So you get a lot of range in that. Again, the high Q switch. So basically, you have a full, frequency sweep with those two mid bands. Okay. And then you have the fixed shelf here again with the discrete steps on the top end. Now, from here, you can also put the two mid bands, isolate them from the rest of the EQ, which will operate independently, and these will feed the sidechain. So this would allow you to do something along the lines of de-essing. And I've never used it that way or experimented with that way, but if you needed to sort of key the compression in some way frequency dependent, then that would be the way to do it. So that feature exists there. This puts the whole EQ in or out. And then you have an output level control here, which allows you to make up for whatever you have going on through the gain structure of the rest of the plugin. Okay, so let's start with a couple of things here. One of the things I wanted to just get to some audio examples here was showing this a little bit with bass, right? So if we start with the bass, and let's just kind of bring up this one guy right here. Let's see. There we go. So what you could do with this, so let's just kind of go through a couple of things. To me, I've always loved optical compressors on basses. So this gives you that sort of LA2A kind of quality, except for you have more attack and release controls. So if we were doing more of a, that style, we could actually go with a faster attack and a slower release. Just quickly for numbers, because I didn't kind of go over it. The ratio goes 1:1 up to 20:1. Right, so the 1:1 gives you no compression. The attack is basically 2 milliseconds up to 200 milliseconds, and the times 4 will basically make that 4 times faster, which would be 0.5 milliseconds on the attack time. So you can make that pretty fast. This does not affect the release, which is separate, and that goes 100 milliseconds up to 5 seconds rather on the slow end of things. But let's just set a little bit of something up here quickly with this. And one of the quick keys for this, and I'll take this kind of in and out because I'm going to have to adjust the gain here for makeup accordingly too. So when I take this in and out, you'll kind of hear what the difference is. But one of the ways is to adjust the threshold so that you get it basically acting the way that you want, and then use the ratio to control the amount of gain reduction. And it works pretty transparently that way. That way you kind of get the movement or the control or whatever it is that you get it responding basically the way that you want. You use the compression to control how much gain reduction that it's giving you, how wide of a range that it's affecting. This is including the EQ. adds like a nice glow to the sound. Is kind of the way that I've always, thought about it or looked at it. Now, if we move on to the EQ here with the bass, we can put the EQ in. Now, basically what I had here was just sort of a mid-range boost just to bring out the note. But what I also want to do here is kind of bring in a little bit of body with this. So you get like that nice kind of evening out of the sound. You get the clarity, and it's basically, it's like tube circuitry, transformers, all Class A components. It's pretty amazing for stuff like that. All right, so let's just quickly kind of go over just some basic things for just like EQing a kick drum, because I wanted to show just something, and obviously I've used this mostly in tracking situations, not so much in mixing situations, but having it as a plugin, if you're not using it for tracking, obviously this is amazing. But one of the things that in terms of an approach that might not be so obvious, because if you say, usually if you're focusing in on a particular frequency, like the fundamental of the kick drum or something along those lines, you may, go to a high Q, kind of zone in on the frequency. And if it makes it a little bit muddy in that particular area, then you can use the shelving EQ to kind of trim around it, right? So that you can kind of focus that particular frequency. Right, just to bring the body out. You could do a similar type of thing with the snare drum. Although the snare drum, the fundamental is going to be a little bit higher. You're going to probably be closer here up to 150 or so, 180 maybe on the snare drum. Right, so I could work this a little bit more like a Pultec and then use this at 150 to kind of create the little ripple that you get with a. And then I can use this to sort of bring a little bit of the top end sheen back. And then if I want to, I can bring in, so this is times 10, so I could get like 5K, bring in a little snap. Right? So you can see how like this is just, as an EQ, it's just amazing. You just have to kind of factor in, the design of working with the two bands and the shelving EQ and working with them together to kind of create just to sort of set up the tonal shaping the way that you'd like to have it. Let's move on to the vocal, right? Because I think this is one of the obvious ones that people will attach to. So let's just.
The world is not my home. I'm passing through.
All right, so let's start by zooming in on this guy here. Okay, so one of the amazing things, it's got like this nice air band thing that you get up on the top end. So you get like that 32K. So I just wanted you to kind of hear that a little bit. We'll kind of work our way backward toward the compression.
The world is not my home. I'm passing through. Something greater than this life that I must be living for. And earthly treasures had me bound, and they always tear me down.
But you could really crank that up quite a lot and just sort of lift everything. Just lift that vocal right up in the speakers.
The world is not my home. I'm passing through.
Right. So here, if there's a little bit of muddiness with the vocal, I can sort of back this off to sort of tone it down, but then find like a nice cue point there on the the bottom end, just to give it a little bit of ripple so you don't lose the body.
The world is not my home. I'm passing through. Something greater than this life that I must be living for.
Here, I think what I did, not sure what I did there. It looks like I did like some kind of a mid-range kind of cut to remove some boxiness or something.
The world is not my home. I'm passing through.
All right, so I'm going to leave that alone because that probably is okay. I'm not sure exactly what I was losing there or thinking about there. But one other thing that I could do here is kind of push a little
World is not my home.
Presence in there.
I'm passing through. Something greater than this life that I must be living for.
Right, you can see just how it just so clean and open and rich sounding. And if I feel like this is like maybe killing a little bit too much of the body.
World is not my home. I'm passing through.
All right, so just to kind of keep that from getting too thinned out. The compressor here, I could also mix this into the compressor by hitting the EQ into the compression.
World is not my home. I'm passing through. Something greater than this life that I must be living for. And earthly treasures had me bound, and they always tear me down.
I'm not sure that that's a good solution for this. Sometimes when you do really heavy EQ, putting it into a compressor helps to kind of glue the sound back together. What I have here is just a fast attack, fast release, just to get it to be responsive, and then I'm using a low threshold and using the ratio to kind of control the vocal level, just as a way of like evening it out. So it's very responsive, and it just kind of keeps the overall performance in line. So here we go.
World is not my home. I'm passing through. Something greater than this life that I must be living for. And earthly treasures had me bound, and they always tear me down.
All right, so you could hear how just how effective that is just opening up a sound. It's really amazing. One thing I'm going to do just before I blow something up is to kind of put this back where it was, which was just 11.5. It's actually grouped together with another track there, so I got to be careful about that. All right, so let's have a listen to everything together, and let's see what kind of mess I created.
The world is not my home. I'm passing through. Something greater than this life that I must be living for. And earthly treasures had me bound, and they always tear me down. And in the shelter of your arms, you'll always find me there. I cast my cares, I find you there in the river. And I cast my cares, I find you there in the river. Oh, in the shadow of the cross.
Anyway, it gives you a good idea of the basic character of it really like super clean, super high, and it just seems like you can do very extreme settings, especially with the EQ on things, and it always just sounds musical. This is a great addition, especially if you're looking for a unison preamp to sort of run through that will give you just. It works on everything. I think what amazed me most in when I started working with this, I think one of the early times or one of the first times that I saw this was in a hip hop studio, in a studio that mostly recorded hip hop records. And I think, what are they doing with this? I figured they wanted something that would be, Avalon is like, kind of like this very clean, rich kind of, their EQs and compressors and their preamps. And I just thought, oh, maybe I would expect something that would be a bit more gritty and aggressive. And it works for that. And it works for just about anything. It's a pretty amazing hardware unit. Never, shy to use it if it's available in a studio. And now it's available inside your Universal Audio setup. So a great addition and great emulation. Has the feel and the sound exactly as I recall it in the hardware. And as usual, Universal Audio always does a great job. So there you have it. Plugin of the week: Universal Audio Avalon VT-737sp tube channel strip. Mouthful, but it's absolutely worth it.